guys, and welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. I am Christina, guest starring today as we review The Hexologist, and this is the star of the channel.
It's Alan, guys, and I really like this book, but I'm so grouchy right now, and it has nothing to do with The Hexologist. This has to do with like why you haven't seen me in ages. I have a physical barrier that is like setting up to film and setting up the mic and setting up the lights. I feel like I am literally pushing through a gelatinous bleeding cube. Like my chest feels like it's about to explode. I've never had anxiety, mental barriers this bad. And so anyway, this book comes out soon, and I gotta film a review because I read this book like 2 months ago.
It's a book we love.
Yes, and I love Josiah Bancroft. So I feel so ill right now, and I'm hoping once we start, I will be cured somehow. So, but Christina read it also. I let her read it. Oh, and we should say that we're reviewing The Hexologist.
I think I said that.
Which is book one of, I think it's going to be a trilogy about the Hexologists. No, it doesn't say that, but I asked him. Anyway, he's contracted for 3 books. This is the most unprofessional review that's ever been done. At any rate, I would like to thank Orbit and the author for an advanced copy of this book, because as you know, the Books of Babel, starting with Sinless Sins, was the first real series that I hadn't read that I read when I started BookTube. And I love it. I still love it. And I love Josiah Bancroft's writing, and that is here in full form as well. And so thank you so much for the advanced copy, which I then lent to my wife. So she thanks you also
I do.
for the advanced copy. And then stay tuned here at the end. If I think about it, I'll put a timestamp where we also talk about the Small Hands of Chokedamp, which is a free Hexologist story that Subterranean Press put out, that you can download now for free as kind of like an intro to the world of Hexologists. And Warren is not in it, but it's about is old. So yeah, I guess without wasting any more time,
Let's get down to business.
this is our review of the Hexologist. She has read it more recently than me, so she's gonna start, and I'm gonna interrupt as soon as I feel like I can say something.
Yeah, so The Hexologist is a book that follows a couple, Iz and Warren Wilby, as they are solving mysteries. They are basically a sort of private detectives, and Iz is the actual hexologist. I was a little confused because it's plural, but she's the one who has the skill of... if you're not familiar, I was not familiar actually with hexology, but she draws sigils. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I'm fairly certain Bancroft made it up. I don't think it's a real thing.
Hexology? Oh, okay. I don't know.
So I don't think anybody's familiar with it.
So she draws in the air symbols that are magical and things happen. So
oftentimes she draws on stuff. It's not.
Yeah.
So
on things in the air.
In this world, like magic used to be a big deal, but now wizards are they perform at parties and stuff. So hexology is something kind of left over.
Kind of on the out.
Yeah, and this world is much more developed than the world of Senlin. The world of the Books of Babel is basically just a tower. We know very little about the outside world. This is a kind of a post-industrial revolution society where magic and magical beings are kind of part of it. Magical beings kind of appear on the outskirts or whatever, and so the world here is really really interesting. And like Christina said, they are a married couple. I guess they're not middle-aged, but they're not quite middle-aged, but they're
also not super young.
Yeah, I would say they're both in their 30s. I hope that's right. And
sounds great.
Yeah, and it is really interesting reading this book because there aren't a lot of fantasy books with married couples. And if they are, it's certainly not happily married couples. And this is an extremely happily married couple. And is the main character, and her husband Warren he's like the administrative assistant. He's a former pro wrestler, which is I think there's one line of that in there. I think there's more of that in the second book. I know. And what do I have? So I gotta show my notes. Hold on. So is
she's fierce.
Yeah, she's definitely fierce. She's standoffish, no nonsense, and her dad was an explorer. I picture her dad as like the dad from Tarzan, Jane's dad from Tarzan.
I
Who-
picture him like the beginning of Up, where they're like,
yeah,
adventure
that
is out
also,
there.
that for sure. And then he's just a big gentle dude who hates being lonely and likes to cook. He really likes cooking, and yeah, Warren is awesome. But the thing is, they love each other, and they actually they love each other a lot. They do it a lot in this book. But it always fades to black. But they are constantly there are constantly these many euphemisms for these two people getting their love on.
It's very tasteful.
I mean, it is, but like, it's just anytime they're alone, they're like, "Hey, you wanna?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I mean, that's good. It's anyway. They are very happily married, so
Yes.
there's,
Very
there's-
happily
There's
married.
nothing explicit for sure. So I love Bancroft's prose, and that is still in form here. Bancroft's prose is so good. It's hard for me to read anything by him quickly, just because I feel like if I read it really fast, I'm ignoring, the just incredible attention to the craft of language that Bancroft has, and so I don't want to miss it. I like some particularly good metaphors, or figurative language, or just word choices. I always learn more words when I read something that Bancroft writes, which is awesome because, I usually highlight them. Like for Chokedamp, I highlighted it on my Kindle, and I have to put a little tab in the book where this is. But I just listen to the way he uses language. Like on page, it's literally on page 2, where he describes the two characters. It literally is on page 2. Nice. Isolde Wilby is often described as imposing, not because she possessed a looming stature or a ringing voice, but because she had a way of imposing her will upon others. Physically, she was a slight woman in the plateau of her 30s, they are in their 30s, with striking, almost vulpine features. She parted her short hair on the side, though her dark curls resisted any further intervention. Her long-suffering stylist had once described her hair as resembling a porcupine with a perm, a characterization Isolde had not minded in the slightest. She was almost entirely insensible to pleasantries, especially the parentheses of polite conversation, preferring to let the drum roll of her heels convey her hellos and her coattails say her goodbye. That's so good. Her husband Warren was a big squarish man with a tree stump of a neck and a lion's mane of receding tawny hair. He wore unfashionable tweed suits that he hoped had a softening effect on his bearing, but which in fact made him look like a garden wall. Though he was a year younger than Isolde, Warren did not look it, and had been since adolescence, mistaken for a man laboring toward the promise of retirement. He had a mustache like a boot brush and limpid hazel eyes whose beauty was squandered on a beetled and bushy brow, an obstruction that often rendered his expressions unfathomable, leading some strangers to assume he was gruffer than he was. In fact, Warren was a man of tender conscience and emotional depth, traits that came in handy when Isolde's brusque manner necessitated a measure of diplomacy. He was considerably better groomed that morning only because he'd risen early to greet the veg man, who unfailingly delivered the freshest greens and gossip in all of Burberton at the unholy hour of 6. So good. It's so good. I really like the main characters. They do a lot to shoulder the burdens of this story because it is a mystery, and this series could easily be serialized and made into an unending series with each a mystery of the week kind of thing, which I really like. I like fantasy and mysteries, and I've realized how much I like that recently. So your thoughts on that particular aspect?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the mystery aspect of it. I love a good mystery. I like to be trying to guess the plot and figure it out myself. So I felt like this had enough clues that along the way you can make some pretty good guesses, but also it wasn't at all predictable. There was never a moment where I was like, I see where this is going, and was right. There were a couple times I actually had a guess, second guessed myself, and was absolutely convinced that my first guess was totally wrong. And then it turned out oh wait, I was actually right. I just got thrown off the track.
I did the same thing. That's true.
But I loved the mystery element of it and being able to trace back how they solve it. Where you're like, oh, that's how they got to that conclusion. I like being able to follow that train of thought. And sometimes when you read a mystery book or watch a movie, for example, Sherlock, the hour-long
The
like,
BBC
BBC
series, yeah.
I could never track it. I'm like, I gotta have to watch that again because that happened too fast. I'm not following. This didn't feel like that. It didn't feel way over my head,
No.
but it also was intriguing enough that it was not predictable.
That's true. I agree.
It was not like formulaic.
I agree. And so anything that Bancroft writes is always full of whimsy in the fact that it's just this very like fairy tale kind of quality, and it's kind of slow to start just because each new chapter seems like it's a vignette into some kind of aspect of the world. Like in this particular one, they go to a graveyard and deal with like the spirits of the dead, and in this one they deal with a succubus, and in this chapter they deal with you know, whatever they're dealing with in this chapter. And so it again, just like Senlin, reminds me kind of like of this phantom toll booth going from, you know, the doldrums to the where the terrible trivium is to, you know, the spelling bee and all that kind of stuff. But eventually everything starts to coalesce, and you see how all of these disparate threads are being kind of wound together, and it actually goes to some surprisingly dark places. And I am always a huge fan of when Bancroft goes into like the dark and kind of violent, because his prose, as I've said before, is always so at odds with the violence that's happening, and you just feel even more unsettled because of the way the violence is being described. Instead of this gritty ultra realism, you have just this flowery language, or a lot of euphemistic language surrounding this grisly murders, and so I always really enjoy that as well.
I enjoy grisly murders.
I mean, no, I just enjoy how it
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm
Yeah.
just teasing. To me, this, when you compare the tone of the Hexologists to the Books of Babel, there's some things that are very similar that just to me felt like coming home, where I was just like, yes, more Bancroft. So the prose was one of those things, just beautifully written, and then the element of whimsy, but just crank that up a little bit from the Books of Babel. To me, there was more of the lightness and playfulness in the Hexologists than in the Books of Babel. And there were some dark moments, but it was a little bit less dark
Yeah.
overall, I would say. At least this first book. We'll
Yeah.
see how the rest of the series goes.
for sure. And also, no longer is the social injustice that was simmering underneath the surface of the Books of Babel. No longer is it hidden behind, you know, metaphor, morality play type things. Like it's like literally right there. There's a whole lot that is said about in this book about the privileged and then the underclasses, about the nobility and the people who have the privilege and their responsibility to care for, not like take care of in that they supply everything for them, but in that it is the people who are in charge of this world, their responsibility. So like a monarch's responsibility to his subjects, or a governing body's responsibility to the governed. Not to make sure they never have any like needs, but to not ignore their needs for
For their own benefit.
so rather than, you know, like siphoning off the life of those below them, making sure that they are taken care of. There's a great scene where is talking to someone in the upper crust or whatever, and they just start talking about euphemisms for that. They don't want to call them the poor anymore. They want to call them the upwardly mobile, or the aspirationally mobile, or something like that. And it's like, why don't you just call them the poor? And the person is like, well, no, we're giving them respect, showing them that they shouldn't feel ashamed to be poor. It's like, what? Well, no, like, you do think they should be ashamed to be poor, which is why you're not calling them the poor. You want to put a euphemism on it. And so there's a lot of that, and a lot of like how long can you sit on the sidelines of kind of a revolution that's brewing? Like, you can't you hear me, Reen, and the rest of Class 7? You can't have a neutral third party and find your own path. No. Eventually, you have to side with this side or the other side, because, I mean, you just have to. You can't ride the fence. And, it talks about how the lower classes get just kind of run roughshod when people play king, because, they're neglected, either because they're having to be like drafted into the military and they go die or fight with the military, or resources are diverted from the actual city or kingdom that has to be poured into the military and the war making. And it's just really good stuff. Like, Commander Vimes would not be out of place in this world, and that is always a win in my book. Okay, so segue into that's all I have. So
okay, let me think if there's anything else I want to say. So one thing that Bancroft does that I really love is that he uses this world that in so many ways does not resemble our own, but at the same time it's like holding up a mirror and showing us some of the things that are just ridiculous, just absurd about culture or society right now, and that you see that in Sinlin as well as in the Hexologist. That has not gone away.
So I really enjoyed this book a lot. Like, I like this one. I'm so happy that Bancroft is back at it, and that this book is coming out soon. It's actually coming out on the 26th of September, so you should absolutely pre-order this in advance. I gave this 5 stars. It's hard to not. Like, it's just such a good start for a series, and adding the mystery element and two people who are not starting from such a despairing point like Senlin and Mario were. So I'm super excited to read the rest of them. Did you rate? You don't rate anything. You're fine.
I don't rate anything, but I will say I've read a handful of books this year. I don't read nearly as much as Alan does, but this has been my favorite read of 2023, and it's been hard not to compare everything I've read since back to the Hexologists.
And we also read The Small Hands of Chokedamp, which I think is a great precursor to the series if you want to get a feel for. Now, Warren isn't in it, but if you want to get a feel for kind of the series and the style beforehand, it is free. Like, the short story is free on Subterranean Press for you to download, so you should check that out. Making an appearance in that one is indeed Sergeant Unthank, who is an unsung hero and is not, in fact, in the Hexologist Book 1 and should be. So, Josiah Bancroft, if you're listening to me, please bring Sergeant Unthank back. I love that guy. Unthank is my favorite, and he's not in the main book. So read The Small Hands of Chokedamp if for no other reason than to see Sergeant Unthank, because he's awesome. Your thoughts about Small Hands of Chokedamp?
Yeah, so
really
if you're
Sergeant
not...
Unthank?
Yeah, well, I liked Unthank too, but if you're not sure if you will like the Hexologist, I think it would be a good teaser to see if it's something that you're interested in, or if you're like me and you're gonna enjoy it, and then you need something, that little dessert where you're like, but I want more. You can save it for after you read the book.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, this is out September 26th. Small Hands of Chokedamp you can get right now. Thank you again so much to Josiah Bancroft and to Orbit for the advanced copy. We very much appreciate it. And go buy this. You can't go wrong. And even if Senlin Ascends wasn't your thing, buy this anyway. And Bancroft is a brilliant writer, so you should give this a try. It is different enough from Senlin that I think you could like this even if you did not enjoy Senlin Ascends. So, any final thoughts?
I would agree. I think many of the critiques that I've heard of Sinlin, so some people didn't jive with Sinlin himself.
That's fine.
I feel like the main characters are more relatable in
Much
the
more.
Hexologists. And another potential critique of Sinlin, I think, was, well, that was maybe more as the series went on. I was going to
Sure.
say, never mind, cut that part.
I'll just leave it in.
No! Don't do that to me. That's not nice. I don't, since this book, it's only one book so far. I can't comment on that part, so JK, erase all of that. It's gone.
You realize that, like,
Rewind.
like
Don't!
you gave me even better stuff.
No!
than you got. I'm leaving it in.
No!
I'm leaving it in.
I will punch you.
Well, okay. Well,
In advance.
I'm leaving it in. Anyway, this is Alan, having pushed the gelatinous cube of anxiety and mental barrier to bring you a
Woo!
Hexologist review. It's really good. Y'all go read it. And this is my wonderful wife.
Christina.
So that's all for... I don't even know my sign-off anymore. That is all from us for today. As always, information about my Patreon and Discord is down in the description. And we'll see you next time, guys. Peace!